Our next speaker that we'll be going into right now is Rabbi Eli Gersten, who is our Safra D'Daina. He's the rabbinic coordinator in charge of Psak and policy at the OU, where all the poskim or the access to the poskim, as well as making sure that every tshuva that we have, every psak that we get is written up, is delineated, and is communicated as well, all falls into his domain. So Rabbi Gersten has prepared a fantastic and fascinating share today on all the types of machlei Akum, on Chalav Yisrael versus Chalav Akum, Pas Yisrael, Gvinas Akum. For those that I'll try to put up the source book as well, which has my makomos in. Otherwise, you should have that source book already emailed out to you, which will have some of my makomos that Rabbi Gersten will be going through today. So Rabbi Gersten, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Elif. Is everyone able to hear me? Is it loud enough? You can hear me? It's good? Okay, fine. So Rabbi Elif introduced me as I'm the recorder of the psak for the OU. I'll just explain a little bit what I do. I'm in charge of all the different OU documents, all the different shuvas, either the ones that are written directly by the poskim, which are today's Hershel Schechter, Rav Asher Weiss, and the ones, of course, Yisrael Belsky Zatzal was one of the poskim for 25 years. We have hundreds of chuvas from him as well. But anyway, if anyone's interested in seeing specific chuvas, if someone's learning, anyone in yeshiva is learning a topic, they want to know what what the OU has to say about this, they're more than welcome to send me an email. That's usually the easiest. You could email me at Gersten, that's GERSTENE @ou.org. I imagine Rabbi Elif at the end will probably send out some different contact information for the different speakers. So if you didn't get that right away, anyway, but that's my email address, and that's what I do much of the day is help people out.
I just sent it out in the chat, so everyone.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, so now I was asked to speak about machalei Akum, different Chalav Akum, Gvinas Akum, Bishul, Pas. Each one of these, of course, is a whole talk in and of itself. We can speak a week on each one of these topics, specifically how the OU deals with them, and they're very complex. Like Rabbi Elif mentioned, the Shulchan Aruch is clear what the guidelines are, but applying it into today's world is more complicated. We'll talk about some of the complexities in a minute. I want to start first with Chalav, the dinim of Chalav Akum and how it relates with the OU. Now, as we all know, there are many standards that people have when it comes to Chalav Akum, Chalav Yisrael. So we know that Chalav Akum is an Isser. Everybody agrees to that. Chalav Yisrael is a requirement. And there are different opinions as to how we satisfy the requirement of Chalav Yisrael. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Igros Moshe. He has his explanation about why we could drink today the regular, milk, USDA milk. It has to do with mirsas, government inspectors, sort of taking the place of mashkichim, the rules, the laws. Okay, that's one standard that some people keep. Some people are mahader. They only want to use powdered milk, the har tzvi. I gave different references on the sheet to where these chuvas are found. If you look at the source sheet, Igros Moshe is in Igros Moshe Yeridei Aleph. It's the chuvas Mem Zayin, Mem Ches, Mem Tes. The har tzvi has a beautiful chuva about why you could be makel to drink chalav stam of powdered milk. It's in his Yeridei Siman Kuf Gimel, and he basically he goes with the idea of Rav Moshe that there's government inspectors also, and he adds to that the fact that it changed from regular milk into powdered milk is a change in the analogous to changing from milk into butter. Okay, we know that there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that butter does not require to be Chalav Yisrael, because he explains not just because you can't make butter out of Chalav Tameh, but because it changed. The Gzeira was only on Chalav, it wasn't on butter. Once there's a change in the form, it's no longer included in the Gzeira. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later on, little more about this. And then there's, of course, those who want to only have Chalav Yisrael. So and there's many dargas in between. There's some people who will eat Chalav Yisrael at home. So anyway, when it comes to the OU, we're makbid that when it comes to products that are labeled Chalav Yisrael, so we take the highest standard, obviously. We go with Ramosha. We go with, we have Yisrael Ro'eu, we have Mashkiach at the farms, we have to kasher out the equipment ahead of time. We do it with Hashkachat Midis. When it comes to regular Chalav, so then we go with the regular rules of Chalav Yisrael. The regular rules of Igros Moshe. Now, what complicates things a little bit is how does the OU deal with pyrav items? So when it comes to an item that was if the company made something that was non-Chalav Yisrael, it was regular OUD, and then they want to now do a pyrav item. So how do we deal? Do we consider the kalim to be iser, or do we consider it to be heterabala? So we know there's a difference in halacha between a bliyah that happens from iser. So for one difference is, in order to kasher from something that's aser, the kalim have to be ein ben yaimai. You can't kasher it so long as it's a ben yaimai, because the water that you use for the kashering itself will become aser. If you look on the notes, the page I gave out, so the first item of halacha here is the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchas Chalav Yisrael, Sif Aleph. It says Chalav shalayv de chachavim oisum kelim shenisbashlu behem kashar iser. So the Chalav Akum asers kelim just like any other iser. We don't have any kulas by Chalav Akum. Afal pisha einarak suffik shemir but davar tamei. Even though really we don't know for sure that anything was mixed in. Right, so maybe you could think that there should be some sort of a kula. V'chein Gvinas Yisrael, and the same thing with Gvinas Akum. Gvinas Akum answers even if it's just even though it's a suffix. We'll see later on what exactly sfeikas are by Gvinas Akum, but it's not known for sure that it's aser. Avaloi chemer shalahem, but there's one exception. The Rama brings butter. Butter, afilu b'makshadog bo yiser, eino yiseres hakelim shizbashlu ba v'lo taruv v'shala. Butter doesn't aser the kalim. Shemisarva beheter hakol shari kilel gabi pashal avicham, and he's going to say the same thing applies to pas, and we'll see more about that as well. The pas also doesn't answer kalim. So we have two levels over here. We have chalav and gevina. Those answer like anything else. In fact, the Shach points out the answer is till shishim. Right? You need shishim times it to be mavatal, and therefore the kasher you'd have to be ein ben yaimai. Otherwise, you would need 60 times the walls of the kli, which you're very unlikely to have in any common case. So that's the rule. When it comes to doing a pyrav production, you first have to kasher out the kalim. Of course, you'd have to kasher them anyway, so that it shouldn't be dairy, it shouldn't be dairy equipment, or OUD. We label it usually as OUD. But aside from that, it would have to be ein ben yaimai. You'd have to wait 24 hours before you kasher. Now there are companies where they do dairy and they do pyrav and they do this on a regular basis. They go back and forth. So sometimes you can sequence the productions, and they can have that they'll do pyrav the beginning of the week. They'll do dairy at the end of the week. They'll close over the weekend. They'll kasher Monday morning, and then they go back to doing pyrav again. That's the simplest situation. There are companies, though, where that's not really feasible. So Ramosha Feisty has a tshuva about this as well. And the OU Rebelsky held like that we should follow like this, which is that you could kasher the kalim twice. We'll talk about this in a second, why this helped. I have it on the sheet over here. I didn't quote the whole tshuva. I just gave you the Maramakum for it. It's in Igros Moshe Yodea Beis Simon Lamed Aleph. So he has a tshuva, is there an eitzah to kasher that when it's still a ben yaimai? Basically his eitzah is, if you kasher it twice, we can be mekel, even though we said that it doesn't help to kasher kli ben yomo, because it makes it back to Isser again. Every time I kasher, I'm just reinvigorating the Isser, reinstating it. I'm not accomplishing anything. But the truth is that this depends on the concept of chaticha nasis nevela. Okay, so there's a Pri Megadim, I quoted it right after that Igros Moshe, the next little paragraph over there. The Pri Megadim writes it's in Yeridea, in Sif Seidas, Simin Tzadi Zayin, Sif Kan Aleph. It's the very end of that. It's a long piece in the Pri Megadim, and at the very end, he quotes from he has a Chuvas Redvaz that he's quoting from. Redvaz is talking about making sugar, and the Goyim used to make sugar. They would put milk, they would add as a whitener into the sugar. And the question was, maybe it makes it all usser. Why don't you say Chaticha Nasas Nevela over there? Even though they add more ingredients and it gets boiled off and it'll in the end, it won't be there anymore, but it should already be too late. Once you add the milk, it should be Chaticha Nasas Nevela. So this is just the very, very end of the tshuva, of the Pri Megadim, of that simon. He says, Umiu mishum chalav shalayv dekochavim yesh layin bei. So he says, why I understand, why isn't there a problem of chalav akum? Yesh laymer, the leisir v'heter chalav ayv dekochavim loy bein and samach, rak raiv. So even though we just said that according to the Shach, the Ramah, we need 60 to be, in order for chalav akum to be bottled, but that's not muskim l'kol. There is opinion of the Yisrael Hatter that holds that it is batal b'raiv. You don't need shishim. The after the done shishim binan says the Pri Megadim. Even though we don't hold like this, we hold you do need to have 60. B'kol makam chaticha nasas nevela b'shari surim u'befra balach yesh lahakel. But as we know from those who learned Yeridea, chanan lach balach is a more kal dike iser, and therefore b'makam hefsim ruba, for instance, were makel. So he says over here, says, well, this is only Shari Surim Lach Balach, okay? Plus we have this Isser V'Heter, who says that it's Batal B'Raiv, so we can add that sheet in. And then he says a very interesting thing at the end. He says, V'Kol Shegein Ata Shein Matzei Chalav Tamei. So this is the Pri Megadim who lived in the 1700s, speaking over here. Lived in I believe he lived in Germany in the 1700s. And he says that it's not matzoi. There's no chalav tamei bisman. So even though we know, even when it's not matzoi, the gzeira still applies, but that's only mishum loy plug. And whenever something's only aser mishum loy plug, there's certain coolness to it. So here the Pri Megadim saying, since ata ain't matzoi chalav tamei at all, the whole thing the aser is only mishum loy plug. And over here you have the shita of the Yisrael Hatter that holds his batal b'raiv, and we're only dealing with something which is lach balach, which anyways makam hefsid you could be makel. So the Pri Megadim says you don't have to worry about the issue of chalav akum when it comes to chanan. You don't have to worry about chalav akum. Ramosha has a similar svara to this. It's slightly different. He says it more generally in terms of isurim d'Rabbanan by lach balach. There's a machlokes whether you say b'chlal, whether we say chanan by any isur d'Rabbanan lach balach. And Ramosha uses that, but it's the same idea as what the Pri Megadim is saying, just the Pri Megadim is localized to Chalav Akum, and the OU has adopted this Ramosha with the explanation though of the Pri Megadim, meaning we do assume that by other Isurim D'Rabbanan, we do hold of Chanan, even Lach Balach, but when it comes to Chalav Akum, we rely on this idea that Ramosha says that you don't say Chanan in such a case, based on this Pri Megadim. So if you don't say Chanan, then it would help to kasher the kli twice, even ben yoimai. Because if I kasher it the first time, it's going to dilute the iser. Let's say I assume I don't have 60 in a kli, keneged the kli, but I assume I for sure have 10. And even pipes and things like that, if I put through a large quantity of water through it, you for sure have 10 times the metal, we'll call it the size of the hot, wherever the metal is hot, through the utensil, I'm able to flush through a tremendous amount of water to do the kashering, which the companies do anyways. For their own purposes, they have what we call a CIP. A CIP stands for a cleaning in place. Cleaning in place means this is how the company cleans their own equipment. They have procedures. Cleaning in place is like they push a button and it will go through. It will send through a certain amount of detergent, a certain amount of acid wash, a certain amount of clean water, cold water, hot water, different temperatures it'll monitor. And this is all computerized, and you could program ahead of time to see what that system is. There's certain items that you can't do a CIP. They have to be taken and cleaned out of place. Baking pans and all types of things like that. Obviously there's no CIP for those. Those are cleaned out of place. But for the large machinery that they have, there's no way to disassemble it, you'd have to get every day, engineers and people who solder and welders together to put together the machines if you're going to take it to place and try scrubbing it out. So the companies, for their own purposes, have to have a system that is going to clean out not just the main tanks, but the pipes. They have to make sure that everything through till the end is all going to be cleaned, especially they're going from places going from dairy to pareve. They don't want to have issues with allergens, things like that. They want to be able to mention that their item is pareve. So the OU will rely then in such a case on doing a double CIP, we'll call it. Oftentimes the CIP might have even in it a hot caustic. Caustic is like a soap, but it's more powerful even. It's like a concentrated form of soap. It's called caustic. It's those who study chemistry know what caustic is. It's those items with a very, very high pH are called are caustic. Sodium hydroxide, for instance, lye. That's it's also called caustic soda. So anyway, that's what they'll put in to clean it out. Caustic has the advantage that it reacts with oils. So whenever you have a sodium hydroxide and an oil coming together, they will react. They'll cause a reaction, and it'll form soap. So if you wanted to get all the proteins, all the fats out of your system, the most effective way of doing it is to use caustic, and that's why you'll probably hear others also talk about Kashering. Always they talk about using caustic. Like we use dish soap at home. In factories, they use something called caustic. Anyway, so that's basically what the OU relies on. They do allow, therefore, Kashering, even Ben Yoma with a double Kashering. There are certain spin-offs of this idea as well. If you have a company that does milk, okay, they're doing ice cream, and now they're going to do an ices, something like that, sorbet. They want it to be pareve. So there you have 100% milk. You'll have to kasher it twice. What happens if you have a product that has only a small amount of milk in it? It's 5% milk. They're putting into some, they're making sort of a syrup, and they're putting in a little bit amount of milk powder into the syrup. Mostly they do pareve, and once in a while they do a pareve. They do a dairy syrup that has in it some dairy. Then, like we just said, you wouldn't even have to kasher it twice then, because if the whole amount of dairy in there to begin with is 5%, so then we assume the amount of the blia in the walls of the kli is only 5% blia. Now, if I'm kashering it and I say I have 10 times the amount of water connected to the volume of the kli, so then I have already 20th, and this is now 10 times the 20th. I already have 200 times the blia by the time I'm kashering. I have 10 times the volume of the wall, and the wall itself is only 5%. And so it's already a 20th. So I have 10 times 20. I have 200 times the water, and we only need shishim. So using that same idea, you could if it's more than a certain amount, already the OU cuts makes a distinction. If it's more than about 12% or so, then the OU says no, we don't want you kashering it only once. But if it's a small amount, like 5%, 6%, somewhere in that range, then we allow kashering it even once with the same cheshbon that if you don't say chaticha nasis nevela by lach balach like this prima gadim, then if I even kasher it once, that would be enough, and then I could call the item afterwards. I call the item afterwards pareve. Now, when it comes to factories, another important thing to keep to deal with is the water that heats the product. At home, we just heat in a pot. We put the pot on the fire. That's the only item of concern is the pot itself. In factories, they don't heat with fire. They heat with steam. And the steam is heated by jacketed kettles. Jacketed kettles mean that there's like a space between the two walls of the vessel. There's like an empty space, a hollow area that goes around the kettle. And that hollow area fills with steam. It gets ejected in on one side and it exits from the bottom. And the whole vessel from top to bottom is getting heated. It's actually a more efficient way of cooking because when I heat with fire, the fire is on the bottom of the pot.
The steam jacketed kettles. So the way they heat is with steam. So this now makes an additional problem. It's not just for dairy, but this is going to be even a more serious problem when it comes to non-kosher, which is that the steam itself can get a blia of the non-kosher or the dairy. So if I have steam on one side of the kettle and I have dairy inside the kettle, we know that we're chayshish that the blia doesn't only extend all the way through the thickness of the volume of the kettle, but it'll also go to a liquid or steam that's on the other side of it as well. So not only does we have an issue now with that we have to kasher the kettles, but we have to kasher the boiler, right? And this boiler could be used for multiple kettles simultaneously. And this will the OU has several ways that we deal with this. This is, like I mentioned, this is a serious question when it comes to dairy, but it's an even more serious question when it comes to non-kosher. When it comes to dairy, see, at least everything else would be, we call a nat bar nat. It would be blia through the kli into the water, and then from the steam into the next kettle. So that would already be a nice tam bar nice tam into the next item. When it comes to Isser, so we know there's no heter of nat bar nat. Even nat bar nat 10 times, 100 times. Is all going to be still Isser. One way that the OU deals with this is by putting chemicals into the boiler water. There's a chemical that the OU likes to use. It's called Bitrix. It's called Bitrix from the word bitter. It's an extremely bitter chemical, and it will make the water in the boiler completely undrinkable, unpalatable at all. In fact, it's a chemical that's used that they put into poison. It itself is not poisonous, but they'll put it into poisonous items to make sure that people don't drink it. So they might use Bitrix, for instance, in perfume or in different other things that are laying around the house that children might get their way into and might, chas v'shalom, drink from these items. So you put a little drop of Bitrix in there, and then no kid would ever, as soon as they put it on their tongue, they'll go running home, to their mother. So, anyway, so that's one way. The OU has several ways of doing it. Another simple way of dealing with the issue is just to have all the steam not be recirculated back to the boiler, but it goes down to drain. And that's an effective method, depending on the place, that could be used as well. So there are many methods how the OU deals with it, but this is something that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with dairy and parv as well, because, like we mentioned before, not everybody holds that what the OU gives a hashkacha on as OUD is acceptable to them, and therefore the OU is very cognizant of this, and when it comes to parv, we want it to be acceptable to everybody. Nobody should think that, well, if the OU will certify regular dairy, therefore their parv items are maybe, they're more lax when it comes to those items. No, we have it as sort of like two separate worlds. But yes, we consider the OU plain milk to be kosher, but yeah, when it comes to when it comes to the parv, we have that as well. That we're okay. There's a lot more to speak about when it comes to Chalav. I just want to speak for a word or two about Gevina. We know when it comes to Gevina, like Rabbi Elson mentioned in the introduction, there has to be a mashkiach in every plant. In order to make Gvinat Yisrael, there has to be. Now, there's two ways that you could make Gvinat Yisrael. It's really a machlokes, the Rama and the Shach. If you look at and on the item on the piece over here, the one says Shochrach Sif Kuftes Vav Sif Beis. It says Gvinat Yisrael Chavim Asura Mevnei Shemavidim Oisam Baor Kevas Shchitasam Shin Avela. So the reason that they were geyser on Gvina is because of Gvinas, because of maybe they reminded it with Nevela, which is a common thing in the past that used to be. Nowadays, the more common thing is to use microbial rennet, which means that they grow it from microbes. It's grown in a lab, and that's the rennet that we use today. That's the 99% of rennet, all rennet to make cheese today in the world is made with microbial rennet. But in ancient times, 100 years ago, or maybe more even than that, the way you made rennet was you took the lining of the calf, and like it says in Shulchan Aruch, Shulchan Aruch talks about either using keva, which is the milk that was inside the stomach, or you could use the ora keva. You could use the lining of the stomach. Now, if you use the lining of the stomach, it's fleishig. If it was shechted, and if it wasn't shechted, it's nevela. Either way, you should not be used. But what you should have used is the keva itself, the milk from inside the calf. And that was the kosher way to make cheese. Now the Ramah says over here, Filu hamudu ba'asavim asura. But even if a person used asavim or microbial rennet or any of that, it would still be asur. Okay, we don't differentiate. Okay, hagav v'chein haminig vein lifritz gather and loy b'makom shenagu behem heter mikay minim. Unless a certain community has such a heter from before, one should not be makel about that to use, to use, let's say, microbial rennet today, and just say, well, I'm soymech that that's what they're using, unless that was the chachmei and Nevina held like that, but but we're not soymech on that. Fine. Then the Ramah says, "Vin Yisrael roya sias gevina v'chaliva." But if the Yid sees the making of the cheese, that's mutter. Okay, that's known as the heter of Yisrael royehu, and that's the standard that the Ramah requires to make Gvinat Yisrael is Yisrael royehu. The Shach disagrees. He says, no, it's not enough for a Yid to see the making of the cheese, even though he sees them putting in asavim or rennet or microbial rennet or some other kosher ingredient in. The Shach says the way you make kosher cheese is you have to have the Yisrael himself put the rennet into the milk. You need it to be, he needs to be maimed with. You need Yisrael to be maimed the cheese. So that's the famous machlekes, the Ramah and the Shach. The Shach has another way to make cheese, a little more complicated, without that, which is if the Yid owns the milk itself. If it belongs to the Yid, then that's considered to be Gvinat Yisrael, even if he wasn't the Yid who put in the milk. How do we paskin? So the Pischei Tshuva, if you look at the next item on the sheet, the Pischei Tshuva brings Ayin Beheita B'Shem B'Shach. Okay, the Shach who's Machmer, who says that you have to have the Yisrael put in the rennet. Ayin Tshuva is Neiv Yehuda. Shechriya Kedivrei the Ramah. Okay, the Neiv Yehuda is Machriya, the halach is like the Ramah, the Loi Kashach, the Taz, the Prichadesh, the Chein Hara Mechas Yaakov, and the Pritoyer. The Kasser Shekein Pasha the Minig, and that's how the Minig. Moshe Feinstein has in his tshuva as well, and he writes that that's the Minig today, is we follow the Ramah, not like the Shach. But even that's true, that's the Iker Halacha, the standard in Hashkachas has been to follow like the Shach, at least l'chatchila. So because if you do like the Shach, first of all, it's much in a commercial setting, it's much more accurate to say that I put in the rennet than to say I saw the dosing of it, for a very simple reason. Today, everything is inside of vats. It's inside of it's sealed systems. To say you saw the re'iyah of the putting in of the rennet, it's very hard to say you saw it. What do you mean? What did you see? You could see someone push the button. What exactly that did, is not always 100% clear. But you could see they loaded up this silo with this, this, and then they pushed the button, and assuming that's what pumps from here to here, and the mashgiach knows the systems. That's what re'iyah would mean today. But you're not actually seeing the making of the cheese. It's all happening behind, sealed vessels. If you do like the Shach, though, you could say if the mashgiach pushes the button and he therefore doses in the milk into doses the rennet into the vat, he did what the Shach said. He did the asiyah. He made the cheese. If he did that on Shabbos, right, the person would be chayav chatas for megabing. So anyway, that's the malacha of so in most places today in the OU system, they'll have the mashgiach push the buttons. He'll be the one that actually doses it in. There are a few exceptions. One exception is on Shabbos. Some cheese factories which are open 7 days a week, and you can't dose in the rennet on Shabbos even if you wanted to, and it's malacha. So, in those places you have to rely on re'iyah. So the mashgiach has to be there. He can either open up the vat, or he can watch them at the keyboard pushing the buttons, and he can see that they loaded in the rennet into the proper place beforehand. So mashgiach know exactly how to keep cheshbon of what goes on in their places, and that's when it comes to if it comes to Gvina, there's really only one standard, which is there has to be Gvinat Yisrael. There are those that make the mistake of thinking that Ramoshe's heter of Chalav applies to cheese as well, and that's incorrect. It's clear that Ramoshe himself did not hold that way. He has tshuvas about Gevina, and he discusses over there how he brings that regarding the milk you can be mako, but by the cheese he says it becomes Gvinas Akum. He has a tshuva about whey, and he talks about how the cheese is going to become Gvinas Akum even though the milk was all heter. Exactly how we deal with whey, that's a whole shir in itself. How the OU deals with giving certification on whey, because it does involve Gvinas Akum, most of it. I mean, you could have kosher cheese being made and kosher whey, but you could also have kosher whey made from Gvinas Akum, which sounds surprising, but that's many tshuvas about this. Moshe has a famous tshuva, but others as well that they allow this, and it has to do with the fact that the milk itself that you're producing it from is kosher, and Gvina does not affect the whey. It's a cold process, making of cheese. You just add the rennet and the milk on its own curdles, and produces these little balls of like cottage cheese, which then get pushed together and made into cheese. And the milk that stays behind is the whey, and that stays kosher even when you're making Gvinas Akum. Just for a word or two about Pas, I would mention that most items that the OU certifies are under the category of Pas Palter. If a person's makbid on Pas Yisrael, there's a minig like the Mishnah Berurah brings only on Shabbos to be makbid on Pas Yisrael. Certainly during a Seres Yemei Tshuva, there's a very widespread minig to be makbid in Shulchan Aruch, to be makbid during a Seres Yemei Tshuva. It's not so clear by Shabbos. Mishnah Berurah says there too, thinks of the Magen Avraham, that a person should be makbid. There are those who are makel on Shabbos. But okay, anyway, people are makbid. So then the person should not assume that a product is Pas Yisrael unless it says so, or there is an OU list of products that are Pas Yisrael, which you can get from Rabbi Elif, and it'll list over there all the products, whether they say so or not, which are indeed Pas Yisrael. I quoted over here the Taras Chatas, which basically gives you the outline of why we are not makbid today. He writes that Chazal took off the Yisr of Pas Akum, and he brings over here Pashal Akum nagu by heter b'roid mekaymes alkein lo yarech b'chilukei dinov. Tikvar pasha da minig lahatirai. Right, the minig today is to make on Pas. Ulachloi afilu b'sheish la Pas Yisrael. Even when it's available, the minig is to be makel. Umishin izer bo yachmer kafi mashiroy tzulahachmer alatzlai. And one who wants to be machmer should be machmer according to whatever standards he sees fit for himself. Okay, so then he brings Amim b'Yamim Shabbein Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That's then the minig is to be machmer. Okay, but aside from that, the minig basically is to be makel, says the Rama, and therefore, like Taras Chatas is the Rama, and therefore he says I'm not going to give you so many rules. That whatever standard a person chooses for themselves, that's adequate. Just one word on Bishul Akum, Bishul Yisrael. Bishul Akum, Bishul Yisrael is not it's not optional. Bishul Yisrael is mandatory. Okay, there is no kula of we don't pass at least any kulas of Bishul Palter, even though there is such an idea brought out, but we don't pass it like that. And therefore, all OU products are Bishul Yisrael. Now, sometimes it'll say on it Bishul Yisrael, and sometimes it won't. And that's because there's different shitas in when we require Bishul Yisrael. For example, just a famous example of the tuna fish. The OU does not require Bishul Yisrael for tuna fish because it is steamed. And Keter, steaming, is one of the heterim brought down in many of the Achronim that it does not require, it's like Ishon, it's like smoking, it does not require it to be Bishul Yisrael. But when it comes to but some people are machmer. They want it to be Bishul Yisrael. So the OU does special Bishul Yisrael runs of tuna fish. It'll say BY for Bishul Yisrael, or it could say OUP, as in Pesach. And if it's OU Pesach, then it's automatically kosher Pesach. So sometimes you do have sort of two levels of Bishul Yisrael, but it's not because one of them is kosher and one of them is not. It's because one of them is kosher and one of them is for those who have chumras or mahadrin and things like that. But all OU products, all are considered Bishul Yisrael according to the poskim of the OU, according to Yisrael Belsky Zatzal, or Yibal L'chaim Tovim, to Herschel Schechter. They consider all the products to be B'Shri Yisrael. I get this all the time. Is this product B'Shri Yisrael? People ask the OU. Yes, all products of the OU are, of course, B'Shri Yisrael. They have to be. Otherwise, the OU could not certify them. Okay. If anybody has any questions, or they can email me as well, or you could ask.
Does anyone have any questions, or we can hold them for later a little bit?
There's one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about the cheese factories operating on Shabbos. So does that mean that the mashgiach goes in and just watches the cheese being produced on Shabbos?
Yes. Sure, Rabbi Elif could tell you more about that. But I believe do you have a company that deals with that, Rabbi Elif? Anyway, but there are, yes, he just watches. In fact, they have special apartments set up for them. They have kosher food, of course. They have their own kitchen. They have their own, they sleep there. It's not just one mashgiach. It's oftentimes they have shifts of mashgiachim. They have to have 2 or 3 mashgiachim who are there for Shabbos, because these type of places that run on Shabbos are running like 24/7. They're there not just Shabbos. They're there on Yom Tov. They're there on. I don't even think they get off for Yom Kippur. They have to be there all the time. So it's not always the same mashgiach. A mashgiach will go for a week, and a different mashgiach will go for a different week. That type of thing. But there are teams of mashgiachim who go to these places, and the days when it's Shabbos and Yom Tov, they are there, they are watching, but they cannot do anything. If there's an issue, I guess the RC will hear, the rabbinic coordinator will hear about it after Shabbos, because there's nothing that anybody could do really on Shabbos. This is what's going on. But yes, they are absolutely there with the whole situation going on with COVID today. It makes things even more complex, as you can imagine. They don't want too many people coming, so they're even limiting how many mashgiachim are allowed in and things. So it puts extra burden on those who are there. They don't want they want to take people's temperature. They want to make sure they have the masks and the gloves and everything. So it's even more complicated. But yes, we have tshuvas and all the different issues that have come up, how to deal with them. Baruch Hashem, we've been able to. It's very complicated, but we've been able to continue giving hashgacha.
Rabbi Gersten, I'll just jump in for a second. In terms of the hashgachas on Shabbos, so Rabbi Gersten's talking about those plants where we have mashgichim 24/7. I just got off the phone dealing with one of them. There's all sorts of issues that have come up recently with all the COVID requirements. One of the plants that I work with and has a full-time team of mashgichim just instituted a new computer system. So basically, when you walk into the place, you have to trigger an automatic door that triggers an automatic turn on of a computer terminal that they have to log and fill out a survey of where they've been, and then they automatically takes a temperature for that. So we work with the plant in that case. Somebody from the quality assurance lab meets them outside when their shift is about to start, then they physically take their temperature, and then does the questionnaire manually so that they can avoid a lot of the whole Shabbos things. I think someone else also asked what about other places on Shabbos is their mirsas because of they know mashgiach won't be coming. Rabbi Gersten, did you speak about that already?
No, I didn't mention mirsas on Shabbos. Yeah,
so just briefly, Rebelsky used to tell mashgichim periodically to check themselves and a family into a nice hotel, and to walk over, that provide us with Tchum Shabbos, and walk over to a facility that they visit. So it doesn't happen all the time, but there are places where I've worked with a couple of my mashgichim as well, that the mashgiach has checked himself into a hotel around the corner and then walked in, or sometimes they can walk from where they live, just depends on the location, and will actually go in on Shabbos. So you're absolutely correct, and they do need to be there in order for them, or in theory they need to be there for the mirsas to work. We're actually going to pause now for 2 minutes, and then we're going to have Rabbi Shrai. Rabbi Gersten, thank you very much for your time today. I'll put Rabbi Gersten's email on the screen again right now for those that want to reach out to him with any questions. That's gersten@ou.org. Rabbi Gersten, thank you very much for being with us today.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me.